Emily Jane Lawson was 24 years old when she disappeared into the Montana wilderness in the summer of 2008. A recent graduate from Montana State University with a degree in elementary education, she worked as a substitute teacher in Billings while applying for full-time teaching positions. Friends described her as cheerful, organized, and eager to explore Montana's outdoor spaces, though she had limited backcountry experience. She had completed only 2 previous camping trips, both car camping at developed campgrounds with her college roommate and her boyfriend. Her online profile showed a young woman excited about starting her career and exploring her adopted home state, posting photos of scenic drives and expressing enthusiasm about her first real backpacking trip. Emily stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighed approximately 125 pounds, and had long blonde hair and blue eyes. She lived in a small apartment in downtown Billings, maintained a close relationship with her parents in Minneapolis, and had recently become engaged to her boyfriend of 3 years, David Anderson. Those who knew her said she seemed happy and optimistic about her future in the months before her disappearance. On July 14, 2008 at 8:30 a.m., Emily Lawson drove her 2004 Ford Explorer into the trailhead parking area at Beartooth Pass in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. A ranger station log shows she self-registered for a 4-day backcountry permit, planning to hike a loop trail and return on July 17. The weather forecast predicted partly cloudy skies with afternoon temperatures reaching 65 degrees. Emily carried a 50-liter backpack containing a 3-person tent, a sleeping bag rated to 20 degrees, a water filter, freeze-dried meals for 5 days, a first aid kit, a map, a compass, and a cell phone. She wore a red fleece jacket, khaki hiking pants, and new Columbia hiking boots she had purchased 2 weeks earlier. Her emergency contact was listed as David Anderson with a Billings phone number. At 2:15 p.m. on July 14th, Emily called David from a high point on the trail where she had cell service. The call lasted 3 minutes, during which she told him the hike was more challenging than expected, but the scenery was beautiful. David later testified that Emily sounded tired but happy, and she said she planned to make camp soon at a lake she could see below. Cell phone records confirmed this was Emily's final outgoing communication. A group of 3 hikers from Seattle, the Morrison family, reported passing Emily on the trail at approximately 3:45 p.m. that same afternoon. They described her as looking exhausted, resting beside the trail with her pack off, and she asked them how much farther to Island Lake. They told her approximately 2 miles, and she thanked them and said she would camp there. The Morrisons were the last confirmed witnesses to see Emily Lawson before she disappeared. By July 18, 2008, when Emily failed to return as scheduled, David Anderson drove to the trailhead at 10:00 a.m. after multiple calls. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He found her vehicle locked in the parking area exactly where she had left it 4 days earlier. A missing persons report was filed with the Park County Sheriff's Department at 11:30 a.m. Emily's parents, Robert and Susan Lawson, were notified at 1:00 p.m. and immediately booked flights from Minneapolis. Search and rescue operations began at first light on July 19th. Park County Sheriff's Department coordinated with the Custer National Forest Service, deploying 2 K9 units and 38 volunteer searchers. The search grid covered a 12-square-mile area surrounding the Beartooth Pass trail system. K9 teams detected Emily's scent along the main trail up to the 7-mile marker near Island Lake, but lost the trail completely in a rocky area near the lake's northern shore. Helicopter surveys on July 20th and 21 revealed no visual evidence of a hiker in distress. Ground teams discovered Emily's intended campsite at Island Lake empty, with no signs of recent human activity. On July 26, searchers conducted a thorough examination of Emily's vehicle. The Explorer was locked, with her purse, wallet containing $180 in cash, and spare car keys in a magnetic case under the rear bumper. A notebook on the passenger seat showed trip planning, including contact information for David and her parents. Nothing suggested Emily had returned to her vehicle after beginning her hike. The search expanded on July 23 to include adjacent wilderness areas and the nearby Stillwater River drainage. FBI agents joined the investigation on July 25, conducting interviews with trailhead visitors and examining Emily's phone records, email accounts, and bank transactions. Her checking account showed no activity after July 13th. No charges appeared on her credit cards. Her social media accounts went silent after a post on July 13th, expressing excitement about her trip. By July 30th, after 12 days of intensive searching, the operation scaled back to periodic aerial sweeps. Sheriff's Department spokesperson Captain Linda Hayes told reporters that ground teams had covered over 90 square miles of terrain. Hayes stated, "We've searched every likely location. At this point, we're dealing with extremely rugged wilderness where someone could be hidden indefinitely." The active search officially suspended on August 5, 2008. Robert and Susan Lawson appeared at a press conference on August 12th, pleading for any information about their daughter. Susan Lawson's statement, delivered through tears, included the words, "Emily is our baby. She wouldn't just disappear. Someone must have seen something. Please help us bring her home." Local news coverage gradually diminished through August and September. On November 3, 2008, the Park County Medical Examiner's Office issued a presumed death certificate for Emily Jane Lawson. State law required substantial evidence that death had occurred, and the combination of the exhaustive search, complete absence of contact, and harsh wilderness conditions met the legal threshold. David Anderson later described receiving the presumed death declaration as the worst moment of my life, worse even than when she first went missing, because it felt like giving up on her. A memorial service was held in Billings on November 22, 2008. Approximately 300 people attended, including Emily's college friends, teaching colleagues, and members of the hiking community who had participated in the search. David Anderson gave a eulogy describing Emily as the person who taught me what love really means. A life insurance policy paid out in January 2009. The Lawson family established a scholarship at Montana State University for education students in Emily's name. Her apartment lease was terminated. Her belongings were packed and moved to her parents' home in Minneapolis. By spring 2009, the case appeared in regional cold case databases, and the Lawson family maintained a website sharing updates and keeping Emily's name visible. On September 8, 2011 at 3:47 p.m., a gas station attendant named Marcus Thompson encountered something impossible at a remote Shell station on Highway 212 near Cook City, Montana. The location was 43 miles from where Emily Lawson had last been seen, in a rural area serving as a gateway to Yellowstone National Park. Thompson was working alone at the station when a woman approached on foot from the direction of the surrounding forest. The woman was barefoot, wearing what appeared to be layers of animal hides and fabric scraps crudely stitched together with visible plant fiber. Her hair hung past her waist in severe tangles matted with debris, and her skin was deeply weathered and marked with extensive scarring. She moved with an unusual gait, shuffling and uncertain, shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. Thompson later told investigators, "I thought maybe she was homeless or on drugs. Then I got closer and realized something was really wrong. She looked like she'd been living in the woods for years." The woman approached the front door but seemed confused by how to open it. Thompson came outside and asked if she needed help. She flinched away from him, then spoke in a hoarse voice barely above a whisper. She said, "I need to call my mom. Can I use your phone?" Thompson offered her water and asked her name. She stared at him for nearly a minute before answering, "Emily. I think I'm Emily Lawson. I used to live in Billings." Thompson immediately called 911 while keeping visual contact with the woman. She sat on the concrete outside the station, rocking slowly and drinking water from a bottle Thompson had given her. She kept repeating fragments. "The Father says I can go home now. The mission is complete. I serve faithfully." Park County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the gas station at 4:25 p.m., along with an ambulance from Livingston Regional Hospital. Paramedics found Emily Lawson sitting on the ground, wrapped in a blanket Thompson had provided, still rocking and muttering. Initial vital signs showed a pulse of 108 beats per minute, blood pressure of 92/58, and a body temperature of 96.4 degrees Fahrenheit. She weighed approximately 87 pounds. Paramedics noted severe malnutrition, dehydration, and what appeared to be both fresh and healed injuries covering her body. Her feet showed extreme callousing and scarring consistent with years of barefoot walking over rough terrain. Her hands displayed similar patterns with multiple fingers showing evidence of poorly healed fractures. Burn scars and deliberate circular patterns marked both forearms. She had crude tattoos on both shoulders, geometric symbols paramedics couldn't identify. During the 35-minute transport to Livingston Regional Hospital, Emily remained largely unresponsive to questions, occasionally whispering fragments that made no coherent sense. Paramedic Jennifer Walsh documented Emily saying, "The Father showed us the true path, and we built the temple stone by stone, and Brother Daniel is with God now. I couldn't save him." At 5:15 p.m., Emily Lawson was admitted to the emergency department under the initial designation Jane Doe, possible psychiatric emergency. Dr. Amanda Foster led the medical team conducting the preliminary examination. Blood work revealed severe vitamin D deficiency, anemia with hemoglobin at 7.8 grams per deciliter, and multiple nutritional deficiencies consistent with years of inadequate diet. X-rays showed evidence of 5 healed rib fractures of varying ages, a healed fracture of the right radius, multiple healed fractures in both hands, and significant bone density loss. Dental examination revealed 4 missing teeth, several broken teeth, and advanced decay. A full-body examination documented 67 distinct scars, including what appeared to be deliberate burn marks, arranged in patterns on her forearms and upper back. The crude tattoos on her shoulders appeared to be made with ash or charcoal pressed into wounds, creating raised scar tissue. Toxicology screens came back negative for drugs and alcohol, but showed elevated cortisol levels consistent with extreme prolonged stress. Dr. Foster's preliminary report noted, patient presents with physical evidence consistent with approximately 3 years of severe deprivation, manual labor, and systematic trauma. Psychological state suggests profound dissociation and possible captivity-related syndrome. Emily was admitted to the psychiatric unit for observation and stabilization. For the first 24 hours, she remained largely catatonic, occasionally muttering the same phrases paramedics had documented. On September 9th at 2:30 p.m., a forensic nurse named Barbara Reeves attempted to establish Emily's identity using photographs. When Emily saw a photograph of herself from 2008, she began to cry silently, touching the image with trembling fingers. She whispered, "That was before I understood, before the Father taught me." Fingerprint analysis using Emily's driver's license records on file with Montana DMV confirmed her identity with absolute certainty at 6:00 p.m. on September 9th. DNA comparison with samples provided by Robert and Susan Lawson confirmed identity with 99.9% certainty on September 10th. Park County Sheriff's Department contacted Robert and Susan Lawson at 8:30 a.m. on September 10th. Detective Marcus Sullivan, who had led the original investigation, made the call personally. Susan Lawson later described the conversation as impossible to comprehend. He kept saying Emily was alive, and I kept thinking it was a cruel mistake. We'd mourned her. We'd said goodbye. The Lawson family arrived at the hospital at 6:00 p.m. on September 10th, having taken the first available flight from Minneapolis. The reunion, conducted under supervision of hospital psychiatric staff, lasted only 20 minutes. Emily recognized her parents but seemed unable to fully accept their presence as real. She kept touching her mother's face, saying, "You look so much older. Did I age you?" The father said time moves differently in the deceived world. Robert Lawson told investigators, "She looked at us like we were strangers. My daughter was in that room somewhere, but someone else was looking out through her eyes." Over the following week, as Emily's physical condition stabilized, psychiatric evaluation revealed the depth of her trauma. Dr. Michael Thornton, a specialist in trauma psychology, conducted daily sessions with Emily. Emily's early testimonies were fragmented, contradictory, and marked by significant gaps in memory. She repeatedly referred to the Father and the compound and the sacred work we had to complete. On September 14th, Emily provided the first coherent account of what happened after her last known sighting on the trail. She stated that on the evening of July 14th, 2008, while setting up camp near Island Lake, she realized she had followed the wrong trail and was not at her intended location. Emily attempted to backtrack but became disoriented as darkness fell. Her cell phone had no signal at her location. She walked for what she estimated was 3 hours, becoming increasingly lost and panicked. She stated, "I knew I should stay put and wait for morning, but I kept thinking I'd recognize something. I just kept getting more lost." At approximately 10:30 p.m., exhausted and frightened, Emily encountered two people she described as a man and a woman, both wearing strange clothes made from hides, carrying torches. The man was approximately 50 years old, tall with a long beard. The woman was younger, perhaps 30, with matted hair and scarring on her face. The man told Emily he was part of a religious community living in the wilderness and that she could rest at their compound, and they would help her find the trail in the morning. Emily, desperate and alone in darkness, accepted their offer. The man and woman led Emily through increasingly rough terrain for what felt like several hours. Emily realized they were heading away from any marked trail. When she questioned this, the man's demeanor changed. He grabbed her arm forcefully and told her, "The Father has been praying for a new sister. You were sent to us." Emily attempted to flee, but the woman blocked her path while the man overpowered her. Emily was forcibly taken to what she later learned was a remote compound deep in roadless wilderness. When Emily fully regained awareness after being given something to drink that made her drowsy, she found herself in a crude shelter made from logs and tarps. Multiple other people were present: the man who had captured her, whom everyone called the Father, the woman, referred to as Sister Rachel, and 3 other men who went by Brother Daniel, Brother Thomas, and Brother Paul. Emily would later learn that all of them had been living at the compound for years, some longer than others. The Father, whose real name Emily never learned with certainty, explained that they were a purification community, living according to divine law revealed through visions. He spoke in circular, philosophical language, mixing Christianity, environmental extremism, and survivalist ideology. He stated that modern society had corrupted humanity and that only through separation, labor, and suffering could the soul achieve purity. The Father claimed divine visions had shown him that lost souls would come to them in the wilderness. He interpreted Emily's arrival as confirmation of his prophetic mission. Over the first month, Emily attempted to escape 6 times. Each attempt resulted in capture, as the captors knew the terrain perfectly, and Emily remained disoriented and physically weakened. Each recapture brought punishment: forced labor without food, isolation in a pit dug into the ground, and burns inflicted with heated metal as purification of rebellious thoughts. The compound consisted of several structures hidden deep in a forested valley: a main shelter built partially underground, a storage structure, an area designated for worship, and crude sleeping quarters. The Father had apparently occupied the location since at least 2004, slowly building infrastructure and living completely off the land. Daily life involved exhausting manual labor, hauling water from a creek 2 miles away, gathering firewood, tending a small garden plot, constructing additional structures from felled trees, and what the Father called spiritual cleansing, involving chanting, fasting, and meditation. Food was severely limited: foraged plants, small game trapped in snares, and minimal cultivated vegetables. The Father maintained control through a combination of physical intimidation, psychological manipulation, and complete isolation. He presented himself as a prophet receiving divine instructions directly from God. He told Emily and the others that their families had forgotten them, that the outside world had moved on, and that their only purpose now was to serve the community's sacred work. He alternated between displays of kindness and explosive violence. Brother Daniel, approximately 35 years old, had been with the Father the longest, since approximately 2005. He was completely devoted to the Father's ideology and served as an enforcer. Brother Thomas and Brother Paul had arrived in 2006 and 2007 respectively, both having been hikers who became lost and were recruited by the Father. Sister Rachel had been at the compound since 2006, and she showed signs of severe psychological damage. Emily later learned that Rachel had disappeared while hiking near Yellowstone in September 2006. Rachel became Emily's only real connection to her former reality. Late at night, when they shared the sleeping area, Rachel would sometimes whisper about her life before. She had been a nurse in Idaho Falls, married with 2 young children. The hiking trip where she disappeared was supposed to be a weekend getaway to clear her mind after a difficult year. Rachel told Emily that during her first year of captivity, she'd fought constantly and tried to escape repeatedly. She showed Emily scars on her back from being whipped with a leather strap. She said the father had broken her left hand deliberately to prevent her escape, and it had healed incorrectly, leaving 3 fingers permanently crooked. Rachel whispered to Emily, "You survive by surrendering. If you keep fighting, he'll break you completely or kill you. Pretend to believe. Work without complaint. Wait for an opportunity that might never come." Emily followed Rachel's advice. She stopped attempting escape. She participated in the religious rituals without resistance. She worked until exhaustion without complaint. She accepted the tattoo marking, circular symbols the father called seals of purity, without protest. She watched herself change. Her body adapted to starvation rations, her feet toughened to leather, her hands grew calloused, her mind learned to dissociate during the worst moments. Time became impossible to track. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, months into seasons. The father did not allow any way to track dates or maintain calendars. Emily estimated passage of time by seasons: summer, fall, first winter, spring, summer again, fall, second winter, spring, summer, fall. She believed approximately 3 years had passed but was not certain. The father's project was construction of what he called a temple of purification, essentially a large log structure he believed would serve as the spiritual center for his movement when more chosen ones arrived. Emily and the others spent over 2 years hauling logs, stripping bark, digging foundation trenches, and assembling the framework under the father's obsessive supervision. The work was backbreaking and seemed endless. Winter of 2009 was particularly brutal. The compound had minimal heating, only fire pits and crude shelters. Emily developed severe frostbite on 2 toes that eventually turned black and partially fell off. Rachel's improperly healed hand caused her constant pain in the cold. Food became even scarcer as snow prevented foraging and made trapping difficult. The father's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He conducted longer worship sessions, spoke about apocalyptic visions with growing intensity, and implemented harsher punishments for perceived failures in devotion or work quality. In March 2010, Brother Daniel became seriously ill. He developed what Emily believed was appendicitis, severe abdominal pain, fever, vomiting. The father refused to allow anyone to seek medical help. He stated that illness was a test of faith and that Daniel must overcome it through prayer and continued labor. Daniel grew worse daily. Emily and Rachel begged the father to get help. They were punished with 3 days of isolation in the pit. On March 23, 2010, by Emily's later estimation, Brother Daniel died in agony. Emily woke to find him cold and rigid, his face contorted in pain. Emily's testimony about this moment, delivered in a flat voice to Detective Sullivan, stated, "Rachel and I held each other and cried. The father said Daniel's purification was complete and his spirit had transcended. We buried him like an animal, and the father made us thank God for Daniel's completion." The father and brothers Thomas and Paul forced Emily and Rachel to help dig a grave in the woods approximately 1 mile from the compound. They buried Brother Daniel without ceremony, marking the location with a cairn of rocks. The father forbade anyone from speaking Daniel's name again. Emily stated, "After Daniel died, I stopped being Emily inside. I became Sister Hope. The name the father gave me. I worked, I prayed, I existed. But Emily was gone." Months passed in a fog of labor, religious indoctrination, and psychological absence. Emily could not later account for much of 2010 with any detail. She described the experience as being a puppet, moving and working but not thinking or feeling. In February 2011, the father's behavior changed dramatically. He began speaking about an imminent final revelation and preparing for the great transition. He grew agitated, sleeping little, conducting worship sessions that lasted for hours. Brothers Thomas and Paul seemed disturbed by the father's state. but remained obedient out of fear. On August 15, 2011, the father suffered what appeared to be a severe stroke. Emily and the others found him collapsed near the worship area at dawn, unable to speak clearly, the right side of his body paralyzed. Brother Thomas panicked, uncertain what to do. For the first time, Emily saw genuine fear in Thomas's eyes. The father died 3 days later, never regaining coherent speech. After the father's death, the compound descended into chaos. Brothers Thomas and Paul, whose entire identities had been built around serving the father, fell apart psychologically. Thomas sat by the father's body for 2 days, not eating or speaking. Paul began ranting about demons and judgment. On August 20th, Thomas told the group he was leaving to find civilization and bring back help. He took minimal supplies and departed. Emily never saw him again. Paul remained at the compound, but became increasingly unstable, talking to himself, refusing to eat, claiming he saw visions. On August 28th, Paul walked away from the compound and did not return. Emily and Rachel were alone. For the first time in 3 years, Emily felt the possibility of freedom, but she was also terrified. The compound had been her entire world for so long that she could barely remember how to exist outside it. Rachel was in even worse psychological condition, unable to make decisions, afraid to leave. Emily and Rachel remained at the compound for nearly 2 weeks, maintaining the routines because they didn't know what else to do. On September 6, 2011, Emily decided they needed to try to find help. She gathered what supplies existed: 2 blankets, some dried food, a metal pot, basic tools. She tried to convince Rachel to come with her, but Rachel refused, saying she was too broken to return to the deceived world. Emily spent an entire day trying to persuade Rachel, but Rachel was adamant. Rachel said, "I can't go back. My children won't know me. My husband thinks I'm dead. I belong here now." On September 7th, Emily left the compound alone, following what she believed was a downhill direction. She became lost almost immediately. For days, Emily wandered the wilderness in a state of profound dissociation. She survived on foraged food, stream water, and occasionally small animals she managed to trap. She slept in hollow logs, under overhangs, wherever provided minimal shelter. She avoided human contact initially, twice seeing hikers in the distance and hiding until they passed. Emily could not explain this avoidance clearly to investigators. She stated, "I was afraid they weren't real. I was afraid the father would somehow know and punish me." Nothing made sense anymore. Emily wandered for over a week before she finally emerged from the forest onto Highway 212 near Cook City. She had walked in a rough circle, covering what searchers later estimated was approximately 40 miles through extremely rugged terrain. When she saw the gas station, Emily stood at the edge of the parking lot for nearly an hour, watching, trying to determine if it was real. Finally, hunger and exhaustion overcame her fear, and she approached. Detective Marcus Sullivan led a team of 8 investigators, supported by FBI specialists in kidnapping and cult crimes. Emily's fragmented testimonies provided crucial information, but also presented significant challenges. Her sense of time was severely distorted, her memories of locations were imprecise, and her psychological state made sustained interviews difficult. Psychiatrists warned that pushing too hard for details could trigger severe dissociative episodes. On September 16, 2011, Emily worked with investigators using topographical maps and descriptions of terrain features. She identified multiple possible locations for the compound based on her memories of the forced march from her capture point, the creek distance, and the general landscape. On September 20th, a combined team from the Sheriff's Department, FBI, and Forest Service began searching a 40-square-mile area of remote wilderness in the Absaroka-Beartooth region. They used helicopters for aerial reconnaissance and ground teams for detailed investigation. On September 26, 2011, at 11:30 a.m., searchers located a site matching Emily's description. The compound existed exactly as she had described. Multiple structures built into a forested valley, hidden under dense tree cover, approximately 27 miles from the nearest maintained trail. Lead investigator FBI Special Agent Carolyn Meeks documented the scene extensively. The site showed clear evidence of long-term human habitation spanning approximately 7 years. The main shelter was built partially underground, reinforced with logs and covered with tarps and sod for insulation and camouflage. A workshop area contained primitive tools, stone blades, woodworking implements, metal pieces scavenged from unknown sources. A worship area featured a crude altar constructed from flat stones with symbols carved into surrounding trees. The symbols matched the tattoos on Emily's shoulders. Fire pits showed years of continuous use. Investigators found minimal food stores, some clothing made from animal hides, and crucially, several notebooks. The notebooks, wrapped in plastic to protect them from moisture, contained extensive writings. Forensic analysis later attributed them to the father. The writings consisted of religious ramblings, apocalyptic visions, detailed plans for the compound's expansion, and disturbing logs documenting chosen ones who had arrived. The logs included names: Rachel Morrison, mentioned explicitly with her arrival date of September 2006. Emily Lawson, referenced as Sister Hope, with her arrival date of July 2008. Daniel Pritchard, referenced as Brother Daniel, with arrival date of June 2005 and death date of March 2010. 2 other names appeared: Thomas Brennan and Paul Vincent. Investigators immediately cross-referenced these names with missing persons databases. Thomas Brennan, age 41, had been reported missing after failing to return from a solo hiking trip near Cook City on August 18, 2006. Paul Vincent, age 38, had disappeared while hiking near Yellowstone's northeast entrance on May 22, 2007. Neither had ever been found. The logs suggested both had been at the compound, and entries indicated both were present when Emily arrived. On September 28, using information from the notebooks and Emily's testimony, investigators located a burial site approximately 1 mile west of the main compound. Forensic excavation revealed the skeletal remains of an adult male in a shallow grave marked with a rock cairn. Clothing fragments and dental records subsequently confirmed the remains as Daniel Pritchard, a software engineer from Bozeman, Montana, who had been reported missing on June 25, 2005 after failing to return from a hiking trip. Cause of death was determined to be peritonitis from a ruptured appendix, with contributing factors of severe malnutrition and lack of medical care. The FBI issued national alerts for Thomas Brennan, Paul Vincent, and Rachel Morrison, described by Emily with physical details and last known to be at the compound in August 2011. Investigators attempted to identify the father through analysis of his writings, possessions found at the compound, and Emily's physical description. A breakthrough came on October 3 when forensic document analysts matched the handwriting in the notebooks to samples from a man named Robert Ernest Klein. Klein, born in 1954, had a documented history of involvement in fringe survivalist groups. County records showed he had owned a small property near Livingston, Montana in 2003. He had disappeared from that property in 2004, and neighbors assumed he had moved. Investigation into Klein's background revealed prior arrests for assault in 1998 and unlawful restraint in 2000. He had served 14 months in prison and been released in 2002. Former acquaintances described him as intelligent, manipulative, and increasingly fixated on apocalyptic religious beliefs. A brother in Oregon, interviewed on October 8th, confirmed from photographs that the remains of the father matched his brother Robert. He stated he had not been in contact with him since 2003 and was not surprised by the investigation's findings, saying, "Robert always believed he was chosen by God for something special. He couldn't accept normal life. I knew he'd end up doing something terrible." The search for Rachel Morrison, Thomas Brennan, and Paul Vincent intensified through October and November 2011. Investigators circulated photographs and composite sketches based on Emily's descriptions. Tips came in from multiple states, but none led to confirmation. On November 12, 2011, hunters in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, approximately 18 miles from the compound, discovered human remains near a steep ravine. The body was male, estimated age 35 to 45, showing signs of exposure and a severe head injury consistent with a fall. Clothing matched Emily's description of what Thomas Brennan wore. DNA analysis confirmed the remains were those of Thomas Brennan. Investigators theorized that Brennan had attempted to reach civilization, but became disoriented, fell from a cliff or steep slope, and died from injuries and exposure. The medical examiner estimated death occurred in late August or early September 2011, shortly after he left the compound. On December 3, 2011, cross-country skiers in the Gallatin National Forest, approximately 32 miles from the compound, discovered a second body. The remains were male, estimated age 35 to 45, deceased approximately 3 months. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Paul Vincent. Cause of death was determined to be hypothermia combined with severe malnutrition and dehydration. Evidence at the scene suggested Vincent had been wandering without coherent direction and had succumbed to exposure. The search for Rachel Morrison continued through the winter of 2011-2012. Search teams returned to the compound multiple times, exploring the surrounding area in expanding circles. On March 15, 2012, a search team discovered a small cave approximately 3 miles from the compound. Inside, they found evidence of recent habitation: a makeshift bed, stored food, and personal items belonging to Rachel Morrison. Rachel herself was not present. A journal found in the cave, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, documented Rachel's psychological state after Emily's departure. The entries showed Rachel had remained at the compound for approximately 2 weeks after Emily left, then had moved to the cave. The final entry, dated November 18, 2011, read, "I can't go back to who I was. The deceived world has no place for me. I will walk into the mountains and let God decide." Intensive searches in the surrounding area found no trace of Rachel Morrison. Her status remains listed as missing and presumed deceased as of 2012. With the deaths of Robert Klein, Thomas Brennan, and Paul Vincent, and the disappearance of Rachel Morrison, no criminal prosecution could proceed against the primary perpetrator. The case was officially closed from a prosecution standpoint on April 20, 2012. The Park County District Attorney's Office released a comprehensive report concluding that Klein had operated a captive compound in remote wilderness for approximately 7 years, holding at least 5 victims, resulting in 2 confirmed deaths and 1 presumed death. The report stated, "This investigation reveals a systematic pattern of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and negligent homicide. The death of the perpetrator prevents criminal prosecution, but the evidence overwhelmingly supports these conclusions." Memorial services were held for Daniel Pritchard, Thomas Brennan, and Paul Vincent. Their families, who had spent years without answers, finally received remains for proper burial. A memorial service was also held for Rachel Morrison, though her body was never recovered. Rachel's husband, James Morrison, stated at a press conference, "For 5 years, we didn't know. Our children grew up thinking their mother abandoned them. Now we know she was a victim. Emily's survival brought us truth, even though the truth is heartbreaking." Emily Lawson remained hospitalized under psychiatric care until January 2012. Her treatment involved intensive trauma therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication for severe PTSD and dissociative disorders. Dr. Michael Thornton, her primary psychiatrist, diagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and persistent dissociative symptoms. Treatment focused on grounding techniques, processing traumatic memories gradually, and rebuilding basic trust in reality and human relationships. Emily struggled with nightmares, flashbacks, severe anxiety in enclosed spaces, difficulty distinguishing past from present during stress, and profound guilt regarding Daniel Pritchard's death and Rachel Morrison's disappearance. She repeatedly expressed to therapists that she should have done more to save Daniel. Though rationally acknowledged no action she could have taken would have changed the outcome, she struggled even more with guilt about leaving Rachel behind. Emily was discharged to outpatient care in January 2012, living initially with her parents in Minneapolis. She attended therapy 4 times weekly. She gradually worked on basic reintegration tasks, going to a grocery store, eating at a restaurant, attending a movie. Each step was extraordinarily challenging. As of June 2012, Emily remained in intensive treatment and had not returned to independent living. Her psychiatrist estimated that meaningful recovery would require many years and that she would likely experience symptoms of trauma indefinitely. David Anderson, Emily's former fiancé visited her multiple times during her hospitalization. Their relationship could not be resumed. David had moved on during the years she was missing, and Emily was psychologically unable to maintain romantic relationships. David later stated to reporters, "The woman I loved died in those woods. Emily survived, but she's a different person now. I wish I could help her, but she needs her family and professionals, not me." Susan Lawson told reporters in May 2012, "We have our daughter back and we thank God for that every day. But Emily is fighting a battle every moment. The physical wounds will heal, but the psychological wounds may never fully heal. We're learning to know this new version of our daughter." The Montana Wilderness System implemented several changes following the investigation. Enhanced trail monitoring systems were installed in the Beartooth and Absaroka wilderness areas. New protocols required hikers on multi-day permits to carry personal locator beacons and check in at designated points. Educational materials about wilderness safety were revised to emphasize the importance of not deviating from planned routes and the risks posed by both natural hazards and potentially dangerous individuals. A public awareness campaign highlighted Emily's case as an example of how quickly situations can deteriorate in wilderness environments. Forest Service officials also acknowledged the investigation revealed significant challenges in monitoring vast remote areas. Spokesperson Jennifer Clark stated, "Robert Klein operated a criminal compound in our wilderness for 7 years without detection. That reality is deeply troubling. We're implementing changes, but we must acknowledge that complete monitoring of millions of acres of wilderness is not feasible." Investigators examining missing persons cases throughout Montana and Wyoming identified 14 unsolved disappearances in wilderness areas between 2004 and 2011 that showed patterns potentially consistent with Klein's activities. None could be definitively connected, but the similarities raised troubling questions about whether additional victims existed. The case revealed uncomfortable truths about wilderness vulnerability. Klein's compound existed less than 30 miles from heavily trafficked tourist areas, yet remained completely undetected for 7 years. His victims were not reckless or unprepared. They were ordinary people engaging in normal outdoor recreation who made small mistakes or encountered bad luck. Their disappearances could have happened to anyone. Emily Lawson's survival was attributed to multiple factors: physical resilience, her decision to follow Rachel Morrison's advice about compliance, and ultimately, the chaotic disintegration of the compound following Klein's death. Detective Sullivan noted, "Emily survived because she adapted. That adaptation came at a tremendous psychological cost. She did what she had to do to stay alive, and now she lives with the consequences of those survival choices." As of late 2012, several questions remained unanswered. What happened to Rachel Morrison after her final journal entry in November 2011? Did Klein capture additional victims before Daniel Pritchard in 2005? Were there other compounds or locations Klein used before establishing the main site? Did anyone else know about the compound and fail to report it? The investigation remained technically open for these questions. Though active searching ceased by August 2012, Emily Lawson's case became a focal point for discussions about wilderness safety, mental health support for trauma survivors, and the investigation of remote area crimes. Her story was covered extensively in regional and national media through 2012. Documentary filmmakers and true crime podcasters requested interviews, which Emily declined through her attorney. Her parents released a statement asking for privacy and stating, "Emily is not ready to share her story publicly, and may never be ready. We ask that people respect her need for healing and distance from media attention." The families of Daniel Pritchard, Thomas Brennan, Paul Vincent, and Rachel Morrison received settlements from victim compensation funds. Civil lawsuits against the Forest Service were discussed but never filed, as attorneys determined governmental immunity protections would make successful litigation nearly impossible. A small memorial was placed at the Beartooth Pass trailhead where Emily Lawson began her journey in July 2008. The plaque reads, "In memory of those lost to wilderness tragedies, may we learn, remember, and remain vigilant." By late 2012, Emily Lawson was learning to navigate a world that had continued without her for 3 years. Technology had advanced with smartphones and social media now ubiquitous. Political landscapes had shifted with a new president elected. Friends had moved on with their lives, married, had children. Her previous career aspirations in teaching seemed impossibly distant. She struggled with the simplest modern conveniences, self-checkout machines, GPS devices, even automatic doors overwhelmed her. She preferred silence and isolation but was working to accept human connection again. In August 2012, Emily participated in a single recorded interview with Detective Sullivan for the case file. She stated, "People ask if I'm grateful to be rescued. I am. But the person who was Emily Lawson died in that compound. I survived, but I lost 3 years of life I'll never recover. I watched Daniel die. I left Rachel behind. Coming back doesn't erase that. It just means I'm in a different kind of survival mode now, one where I have to figure out how to be human again." The wilderness of the Absaroka Beartooth region continues to draw hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. Most experience its beauty and return home safely with memories of pristine landscapes and wildlife encounters. But the wilderness holds dangers beyond natural hazards, beyond storms and cliffs and cold. It holds the possibility of encountering someone whose connection to reality has fractured, someone who sees isolation as opportunity, someone who interprets lost hikers as divine gifts. 3 people are dead who should be alive: Daniel Pritchard, Thomas Brennan, and Paul Vincent. 1 person is missing and presumed dead: Rachel Morrison. 1 person survived who will carry those 3 years forever: Emily Lawson. And somewhere in the vast wilderness, questions remain about whether other victims existed before 2005, whether other families still wonder what happened to someone who simply never came home from a hike, whether other compounds existed that were never discovered. The mountains still call to adventurers seeking beauty and challenge and solitude. But Emily Lawson's story serves as a reminder that danger exists not only in the form of natural hazards, but in the human element, the possibility that a wrong turn, a moment of disorientation, a seemingly helpful stranger, can lead to years of captivity and suffering. The wilderness is beautiful and terrible, offering both transcendence and tragedy, sometimes separated by nothing more than a single decision made in a moment of fear and exhaustion. Emily Lawson made it back, but the price of survival was the loss of who she had been. The mountains kept their secrets for 3 years before releasing her, and they still hold secrets about Rachel Morrison, about whether others suffered at Klein's hands before Daniel Pritchard, about the true scope of what happened in that hidden valley. Some questions will never be fully answered and some losses can never be recovered, even when the missing are found.